I don't know if you have this same sense, but I find going back and looking at scores and listening to the music that we used to make in large groups, it's a very mystical experience. Like I find myself wondering how we did that. Like it doesn't make sense. I'm looking at the score going, all these people played those parts together. This doesn't even make sense. Like, how did we do any of this? It doesn't, I don't know if you have that same.
Yeah, it's like, how did we coordinate that over Zoom?
Yeah.
Well, and specifically to our performance of Das Lied, I mean, how did we do that in that heat that night?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Richard and I had that picture that we took together at one of the rehearsals where it said real feel 108 degrees or something,
Yes.
107 degrees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you worried about fainting at all? Does that ever, during that concert, did that ever come up?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because you just, especially, and your part too is so demanding, especially that last song, and then the fast part of the other one that I always like hold my breath while you're going through it. But that, with my songs, because the tessitura is so high and you're just constantly going and going and going, you get lightheaded anyway. So it's like
as I recall, I feel like the heat kind of we got a little relief the night of the concert. So the rehearsals were pretty bad. And then when we got to the actual performance, it was a lot better. So I feel like that was good. It was like we were prepping in the hardest part of it so that we could then feel like, oh, this is breezy now.
It's like training with the extra weights on the
Exactly.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about those performances, I felt, was just the connection that we had to the audience because they were so there.
So close, yeah.
It was fabulous because I think the time I'd sung it before was at the Chicago Symphony, and that was they were so much further away, and you just get that connection. It's really amazing to have that ability. Your audience there at the Brit Festival is really a very special audience. So
they are. Yeah.
It's made up of like so many people who have connections to the musicians on the stage too.
Okay.
Like we all stay with people in the community for 3 weeks, and we like get to know them over that time, and then they bring their friends, and because the town is so small, there's just like such an intimate connection between everybody. And I feel like that's part of what makes Brit really special, and what I really miss right now is like connection. So
and you get the feeling when we are out and about in the town that the community there is really proud of that festival. You're here to be a part of the Brit Festival, like that was all very exciting, when you talk to people there, and that's a nice thing to have that support in the community, and I feel like you really have that there.
Yeah, and I think especially for a piece like Das Lied, that's for a summer festival environment, that's a big one. I mean, we've done Mahler 1 and Mahler 2. We were supposed to do Mahler 5 this year, but Das Lied is a different animal entirely. I mean, I feel like I don't know, but I haven't conducted all the Mahler symphonies, and now I think at least several of them are going to be off the table for a very long time because they would violate every concept of social distancing known to the species. But I wanted to do that one. I felt a little bit like a kid again when you're a young pianist and you want to play like Beethoven Opus 111 and the teacher's like, no, you can start with the Appassionata or the Waldstein. You're not just going to jump there. But I felt like that, like getting to do Das Lied. It's I don't know, but it's not easy to listen to, but it is incredibly rewarding. I know that's just such a basic statement, but it's not. I've never put that music on casually. I've never said, "Hey, I just feel like listening to Das Lied." You can't. I don't know what that's like for you all, but it's an enormously complex listening experience.
Teddy, was that your first one?
It was.
You've done? Oh wow, that's awesome.
I never tell anybody.
I know, I'm honored.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Was it either of your first?
No, Tammy's probably done a million of them, and I think I've done every version that there is at this point. I've done the Cortese reduction, I've done the Schoenberg reduction, and I've done the original piano version, which has different words and all this other stuff, which is really cool actually when you look at it.
Well done. Yeah.
Well, it's a wonderful piece. I always tell people about it that I spent 6 months on the text before I even sang a note. And because I was like, what are my songs about? She has all the pretty music, and then that last movement when someone like Tammy is singing it, you're just sitting there going, okay, don't be a sucker and start crying because it's so beautiful. And what you guys accomplished, it's just like sitting there going, don't be a bad colleague. It's gorgeous. The words are unbelievable. And
while I'm singing it, I'm thinking, don't cry. It's going to ruin everything. So at least you can like sit there and enjoy it. It's
absolutely. And act like a statue, like you're not affected by this wonderful music. But it's so interesting that it's pieces like that you have to live with for such a long time. Right now I'm learning the Rückert that I'm doing for a virtual concert.
Oh, be still my heart.
Yeah, it's so much fun. But I was learning the Eighth Symphony, and then that has been postponed now for obvious reasons. You really don't want, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it by far Das Lied has been the most difficult of the Mahler I've been exposed to so far. So
the tenor. I mean, it's so interesting the difference in character between the ones that the mezzo sings and the movements that the tenor sing, because I feel like every time the tenor stands up, it's just like scream fest. I mean, I don't know how you get through it. The songs are shorter, but it's just the amount that it requires from the singer. It's just like immediate. The emotion's just right there and just straight to the audience. And I mean, a lot. And all the versions too. I mean, it's like the full orchestral version as well as in the chamber versions. I feel like it still doesn't let up for the tenor.
Yeah, for me, the Schoenberg version is the most difficult because it puts too many parts in the piano. And I don't feel as supported underneath it. So the Cortese is wonderful because it takes them, I think it goes from 13 to 20. And then all of a sudden you feel that little bit of oomph underneath you, and you're like, oh, okay. I can make a bad sound here and there, and it's going to be all right.
Not that you ever make a bad sound.
Well, I mean, how this piece is. It's not, I think if you go into it expecting perfection, it's just absolutely the wrong. Well, I mean, in any art, I think it's the wrong thing to do. If you just say, this is what I'm trying to communicate, and you find that's what was so special, I think, about that performance with that audience, is remembering the connection that we had between Teddy and us together in the songs, and being able to feel that spirit on stage. And so many of the members of your orchestra I'd sung with in like Washington, I'd just done the ring cycle there, and there were several of our ring players that were there, and I was just like, oh my gosh, so it's really fun.
And I mean, I think there are those multiple levels of challenges, because it's an unwieldy piece. It doesn't flow like the Fifth Symphony. It doesn't flow like the First Symphony. And of course, there are so few pieces of Mahler total, but it feels like it feels like you're out on a limb, like you're way deep into whatever is most experimental form is in many senses. That you're balancing issues of time in a very strange way. Like he hasn't taken care of it all for you. You're having to make so many decisions about timing, and like you're almost like a director, a stage director, a film director, like thinking about pacing and timing and shot distances in a way that it's not like the script just flows for you. You especially with the way it's broken up, you have to reset each movement. Is just like then you have to get into a totally different space and recast the whole thing. It's very, I've never been so exhausted at the end of a standard rep, not physically, just like mentally. I thought, oh my God, I don't even know what to think right now. Like I am drained mentally. I don't know what is happening anymore.
Yeah.
That's funny that you compare it to opera. I mean, obviously with vocal parts, that makes sense. But I was having a conversation with our music director here, Yader Binyamini, who is an opera conductor traditionally, and he was just appointed in Detroit. And like that was the exact comparison that we were both making, that Mahler is such an operatic composer, and everybody plays a character, and there is such a strong plot line, even without words. And I guess that makes it so much more rewarding for us on our instruments who don't have text. We still get to play a character, and that's so much fun in Mahler.
And a very important character too. I mean, we tap into into that so often. That's I said I'd done the piano version. Well, I did the piano version after I'd done the orchestral version, and it was so much harder to do because I missed hearing the different voices, because you can't help but color your voice towards the instrument you just hear somewhat, because you're like, oh, that's why he had him play that, so I'll just
exactly.
Right,
or you hear the bird call and you hear that in the orchestra, which is really difficult to replicate in piano.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure is.
Well, and he has, you know, Mahler definitely has like his stock characters. I feel like he, you know, Mahler was, it's like kind of like, you know, the Lord of the Rings or something, where he's continuing the same characters. The horns have a distinctive kind of role that they play, just like the trumpet has a particular role throughout his entire, you know, all of his compositions. It's like a myth arc almost. And, you know, I was reminded of that with you know, MTT talks obviously about Mahler in such clarity and depth. And there's that moment in one of the films that he did about Mahler where he goes to Mahler's hometown and he walks around the town square and he says, when you're there, you can really see how, you know, the military band that would have marched right through the square, like there's the Jewish quarter where the, you know, like Klezmerim would have been, like there's a place where somebody would have played a call a couple of times during the day. All those things became part of Mahler's kind of mythical characters that appear over and over and over again. And so it's right, like the horns have a role that's not like the horns in a Haydn symphony where it's just, you know, you play your fifths going to a third and that's kind of what you do. It's not a character, right?
Yeah.
Not to belittle it, it's still important, but
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it, well, let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, the setup of the piece. And because it's a weird, there aren't very many pieces that have this configuration, right? I mean, the way it's structured as a work, and you know, how do you approach that? Because you both have very distinct roles, and a lot of it you're just sitting there on stage waiting for your turn. I mean, what's the whole dynamic between the two vocalists, and what do you think of you know, in terms of like a narrative and how the songs relate to each other? Of course, the last song being how many times longer than any other song. It's just, you know, how do you conceive of it?
Yeah.
Tammy, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel like our songs are so different in character from one another, which I think is so nice. And the way that he set them up, where the tenor is just, you know, exploding from the very first moment that he sings. And then when that second song starts, it's all very almost introspective as she's watching it's almost like she's watching the leaves swirling as she's singing about the fall and the shadows. And I feel like the characters of my songs are all so much more inside, you know, where she's just observing and speaking to what she sees, where the tenor, I think, is just, I don't know, maybe handling the pains of life in a completely different way.
Yes, I agree with you totally. And one of the difficulties I had with this piece preparing it is that I made a mistake of focusing just on my songs at first, like you would if you had something so challenging. And then when you get to the bigger piece as a whole, you have this realization, or I did, as the person that's not involved in Der Abschied, is that everything in preparation up to that song, we have to do in a certain way that we earn that song. Because I'm sorry, that song is just a masterpiece. It's just, if we just did that, it's just text. What he did with the text is amazing. When you see the differences, that what that text was in the beginning, what the original translation was, what the French was, what the German was, and then when Mahler inserted the poem at the very end by Wei Wan, is that it? Wei Wan, that poem that he inserts at the very end, and you just see the craftsmanship of the process that he went through with that piece specifically. It just informs your interpretation and what your own expectation of what to say is then. And it just clearly delineates like what the expectation is for your part each and every time. And you just sit back and enjoy the rest of it.
Yeah.
That song, so obviously just to establish, you know, who knows what people are, you know, what kind of background they have coming into this. Established. So this is based on ancient Chinese poetry, but as you mentioned, Richard, through many different lenses. It's not just like a direct translation. It's very much a product of the romantic approach to rethinking inspiration from ancient text. And of course, that there's a combination of philosophy and the expression of humanity in it. It's not just personal poetry, but it has an element of broader philosophy kind of included in it. All right, well, thank you all so much for doing it. Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you guys.
Great to meet you all.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. See ya.